Holy Spirit, amen. Tomorrow, or today now, we celebrate St. John the Apostle, the Theologian, who wrote the most complex and simple book of the Bible. Truly, his symbol is appropriate, the eagle, because he soars in the wings of theology. And if you listen today to the readings from his epistle, you can see why. He really understood about love. And I have two stories here about love, about St. John. And they're from ancient sources. One is one that isn't too politically correct. St. John didn't bother with being politically correct, he bothered with being correct. And he had great love, but also love for truth, because you cannot have love without also loving the truth. There's a story from Polycarp, one of the apostolic fathers right after the apostles, who was Bishop of Smyrna, and he says that St. John was going into a public bath, and there was Seraphim in the bath, and he rushed out of it and said, "Let's fly, lest even the bathhouse fall down, because Seraphim, the enemy of the truth, is within." So I'm not advising that you go on Facebook and start calling people enemies of truth, but we must love the truth. We must understand what the truth is and what is not true. I don't remember who Seraphim is as a heretic. I don't remember, but I suppose we could find out. Perhaps his name has been lost to history like the rich man who doesn't have a name. This story, many of you know. It's really a beautiful story. St. John lived a long time. He lived to be almost 100 years old. And he was in Ephesus for a long period of time. He made a man a bishop, and there was a young man that was young and handsome and strong, and it looked like he was going to be a good boy. And he entrusted this boy to the bishop. The bishop catechized him and baptized him. And St. John went away on other business. And, well, sometimes the world gets in the way. This young man was a good man, but then he started doing bad things. He started becoming a thief. And he was very strong, very charismatic. So he became the leader of thieves. So eventually St. John came back and found out about this. And he had said something to the bishop like, "Have you taken care of that treasure which I entrusted to you?" The bishop didn't understand. And he said, finally he understood that it was the young man, and the bishop had to admit with shame and tears that the young man had left not only the church, but decent society. He was in the hills. He was a leader of thieves. So St. John, an old man, ran up into the mountains, went up into the mountains. His sole reason to go to the mountains was to be captured. Now, back then, a thief was also a murderer, basically. Pretty much, they were going to kill you and take your money. So it was very dangerous to go in certain areas, especially certain mountain passes. It was very likely that you would be robbed and probably beaten and probably killed. But St. John went. And he kept calling for the man, and eventually the man saw him and started to run away from him. And St. John ran after him. Now, there's not really a contest. We're not going to talk about some sort of great miracle or St. John all of a sudden was able to run like a sprinter. He wasn't. But he kept going. He didn't stop. And eventually, the young man gave up. And St. John brought him back with him and catechized him and brought him back to the household of faith. He was an old man. He was an apostle. And yet he didn't care. He ran after just one guy in the mountains. Not caring about his personal safety, and also not caring about his dignity or anything else. This is one of my favorite St. John stories. This is how we should be. A about pursuing people. If we don't pursue people in a physical way, then don't ever give up praying for them. Don't consider anybody to be lost. There's a lot of people that are lost, but there's a lot of people that appear to be lost. And God will save them. And you shall participate in their salvation by praying for them. I would recommend to you very strongly that you would be reading the epistles of St. John several times a year. I read them easily several times a year, and you should too. Certainly the first epistle, the second and the third are shorter and less important, but the first epistle you should be reading all the time. Read it often. May St. John's prayer save us. The blessing of the Lord be upon you through his grace and love for mankind, always now and ever, and unto the ages of ages.